So good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
I get to see you 2 days in a row.
Yes.
I enjoy. So before we get talking about, I'll give a digital marketing tip of the week. Oh, I probably should have thought of one. I'll think of something. Oh, do you have a question? Maybe I can answer your question today.
Ooh, digital marketing. Okay, digital marketing tip of the week. I'm trying to think. I actually posted something that I had a question. I almost hesitated on posting.
Oh, what was it?
It was a list because you know how in email marketing, you have to avoid a whole bunch of words or you're not going to have high visibility, like, spammy words.
Yeah.
So I posted these articles of these lists of spammy words on social media. And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, am I going to be picked up in some sort of be in like Facebook bad graces because I'm like listing literally like 200 spammy words in a post. And I'm like, I wonder if it translates to social media.
That's interesting. Well, you'll find out, I think, on that post. Yeah, when I was doing the, I don't know if I've done this already, but I can actually show some things here while we're getting started too. So yesterday, I'm so glad we're talking today about this topic because yesterday you had such a great workshop in your group about creating your one-liner, right? And it so ties in with the whole niche thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is such a good talk. And it's hard, like I tried forever to say, I do it all. Well, it was like a tap dance. I do this and I do that and I do it for this one and I'll do it for anyone who asks me. But you're right. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to get into this conversation.
Me too. Especially thinking of the wonderful women in your group in their particular, especially with the heart-centered entrepreneurs. This is powerful, but also it can be difficult. But I'll talk more about that when we officially get started.
Okay, here we go. Oh, no. So let's talk a little bit about like on email, what gets you tagged for spam. So I had done a few things. I won't bring up my slides, but I was getting reminded of what tags you for. So one of the questions people had asked me was about emojis, and we've talked about that on this group as well. Emojis, if you use them correctly, won't get you for spam, but the idea is that some of the emojis are commonly used with and you can imagine some of the emojis are used with spammy words. So you want to make sure you're using ones that aren't. And one of the things for figuring out what might cause spam is go and look in your own spam folder, right? And see that's a person you usually hear from. Why did that end up in the spam folder? Which is interesting. To be marked as spam, to go into the spam folder is a little bit different than being marked as spam. If you send me like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp email and I mark it as spam because I didn't really have permission, I wouldn't. No. But
every marketer's nightmare.
Oh my gosh, I have this story about one of my clients. What happened? It was the bot thing wasn't working. What do they call that? The CAPTCHA wasn't working on the form. And so all of the emails went in and then they got marked as spam by like 40 people in one day. And we got shut down. Yeah, it was a nightmare. Permission-based is so important. And to look at your list and to really know who's on your list. I had a lovely call with somebody yesterday. I'm going to shout out to Melody at Family Stories. If you haven't checked out Melody Joy Family Stories, she's amazing and she does such work. And I'm not that much of a crier, but her stories that I was looking at, they really made me tear up a bit. But we were talking about her list and how that is her most valuable asset. I'm kind of going off of spam and into the value of lists. Her list is her most valuable asset. Yes, she'll do a little bit of email marketing, but more what she's doing is using that list of connections because she's a photographer. She is kind of local based. So she's really loving up her list. She sends cards. She makes phone calls. She sends them "I'm thinking of you" articles. She knows their name of their kids, their pets, right? So your list is your most valuable asset. All the digital marketing could go away. Internet could shut down. But if you are able to reach your list, that's probably the most important thing you can do. So that is my digital marketing tip of the week. Yeah, don't use any of those spammy words. They don't like all caps. They don't like a lot of exclamation points. They'll even say, if you do RE, colon as though it were in response to something that happened before, which would kind of make you open it. Sometimes people will mark you as spam in that way. It's not that it gets filtered into spam, but people will mark you as spam. Sort of like, what was that?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So that being my digital marketing tip, I can't believe I forgot to come up with this. So thank you for helping me figure one out today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a good, those were great.
So today I am so happy to introduce my new friend, Dani Whitestone. We met a few months ago, and honestly, I'm such a groupie now. I just do whatever I follow Dani, I watch what she's doing. I'm in her free business Facebook group and her paid group, and loving every minute of it. So let me give you the official bio. Dani Whitestone is the sole female co-founder of Turbo Law Software, which she recently led from startup through acquisition. She's currently now the founder of Women's Small Business and Leadership Network, which is a growth-focused association of like-minded female entrepreneurs. She passionately believes the path of small business is a way for women to live their true purpose. She's dedicated to eliminating obstacles to their success. Her mission is to give women entrepreneurs the support, guidance, and resources they need to reach their goals. And she's currently residing in North Brookfield, Massachusetts, with her adorable son, Tristan. So today we're going to talk about the riches in the niches. And before we get into that, I just want to tell everybody, when I asked Dani what is her superpower, she told me that it's small business growth. And so I'm going to ask you about that first, Dani. How do you use your, I mean, it's kind of clear, but for people who don't know you, how do you use that superpower?
I say small business growth and also removing roadblocks. I can't stand roadblocks, and they kind of go hand in hand. And I say small business growth because sometimes, a small business owner, and someone who is going into small business, generally you generally do it because you have you have this higher calling or higher purpose, because it's difficult. So I want to make sure that I do everything I can to get people, and most particularly my market, women, from where they are to where they want to be. And sometimes that's growth tactics for riches in the niches, but other times it's removing roadblocks. And sometimes whether they're technological roadblocks and sometimes they're mental roadblocks in terms of they don't think they can achieve something, but they really truly can. So I love just taking a look at the kind of like a holistic approach. I know we've talked about this in terms of the holistic perspective, but really kind of looking at the whole person and the whole business and saying, okay, where you are, where do you want to be? Let's figure it out, and let's get there.
That's awesome. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about, and so needed, and also, yes, exactly where I live and where my community is, and the Rise Above Noise group where we're live right now. If you're live on the group, say hey. Hey, Alyssa is here. Alyssa is amazing. She owns Integrative Wellness in Rhode Island and is all about positive energy. If you're not following Integrative, Alyssa, put your group into the comments there too, because that's another fabulous group for people to follow, where it's just that positive energy, right? There's so much negative out there in this world that if I can surround myself with people like you and Alyssa, hey, my brother Scott's on here, positive people living positive lives, doing positive things, then it's easier to block out all those negative things. And if we can grow businesses, have an income, and make differences in people's lives, even better.
I agree. Again, people, bringing their unique values to the world just makes everything better and rises everyone up, because not everyone's going to be a heart surgeon, but that doesn't mean it's what you're doing in your space isn't any less valuable. It's just whatever your gift is.
Right. So let's talk about that, right? Your gift and staying kind of in your lane, creating a niche. How do you know what your niche is, right? How do you choose a niche?
Choosing a niche is you can look at it and kind of put it through a litmus test of three things. And there's a gentleman by Frank Kern who showed me this. And one is in terms of in choosing a niche is when you look trying to define who you want to work with. You can look at it in terms of personal fulfillment, value to the market, and profit. And what you can do is take each one of those elements and even on like a piece of paper, sketch, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where does that fall? And then you can even like tally the points if you're trying to choose, to work with a certain market and work with a certain clientele. I did this trying to figure out after, coming out of my last business, my software company, in terms of going into the coaching space, who did I want to work with? I had a lot of people telling me, oh, you should be an executive coach. And because, okay, great. You can, hundreds, if not $1,000 an hour. I'm like, okay, that's great. The money's good. So in terms of, value to kind of go in not quite in order, but value to the market, very high, profit, very high. For me, Susan, personal fulfillment was like a 2. And I'll tell you why. Because I would talk to the executives in my family or cookouts, and like they'd tell me their challenges, and it was horrible in terms of people in some of those upper levels of corporate management. It's like they didn't have power above them, they didn't have power below them. And my only solution for them was to say, like, I'm like, ugh, like, why would you do that? Quit and start a small business. So, which would make me a terrible, if I was an executive coach and just told everyone to quit when they came see me, like,
yeah, that would be bad.
That would be bad. So I'd be a terrible executive coach. So in other words, I'm like, okay, executive coaching, that's not for me. But in terms of drilling down, like how I ended up, focusing on, women who want to grow their small businesses. You start up. So in terms of, I started up here, and I do this motion a lot, like I'm doing the YMCA, but I start up here. I'm like, okay, yep. Business coach. I'm like, that's really broad. So if I just said, hey, everybody, I'm a business coach, like that kind of, who cares? Like there's a zillion business coaches. Now I'm like, okay, what if I go down? And I'm like, okay, where's my true heart? Small business. Okay, I'm a small business coach. Okay, better, okay. But still really doesn't really give it kind of like, doesn't like perk up any ears. And I'm like, you know what? I've been in tech. I've been surrounded by guys like my entire existence. I'm like, what about women's small business coach? And to the point of the riches are in the niches, this is how I'm on this interview and speaking with your audience today. A women's small business coach. And even further, as I drill down in terms of what need is there, it's growth. So that's how we found each other.
So, but that was a very brave thing you did, right? Like not knowing who's going to be able to, make the use of your skills, especially where you went from like a law thing, mm-hmm. where I just picture law. This picture of like law offices. I'm sorry for any of the attorneys who are listening, but I picture of them with like bundles of money up on their desk. I know that's not true, but I just think about like what lawyers charge per hour and how needed they are, and definitely right value to the market and a good profit, and they work hard. So you went from that mm-hmm. to, people like myself who we're doing it all. We don't have somebody. Most of us, some of us have a VA, we have assistants. I do have some fabulous people helping me out. But for the most part, it's me doing the books and the organizing and the things.
Most attorneys are small business owners and solopreneurs.
Okay.
That's for the percentage. And all my best friends are these like solopreneurs, small business, and women. They're just powerhouse women. They're on a mission to do well, to do and bring value and good to the world. And so it wasn't as much of a jump, as it may seem. Have I been in places where I just scratch my head and they have like glass that like goes dark on a button? I'm like, I don't understand where I am. I have chickens in my backyard, but absolutely. So one of the things in terms of, harnessing that power of a niche and why you choose your niche And it's something that small, small, whether you're an attorney or any kind of small businesses, is it gives you a voice. And that's why I love being on Rise Above Noise talking about this.
Mm. Tell me more about that. It gives you a voice. Tell me more about that.
When you pick a niche, your money, first of all, your money works harder for you. And as small business owners, every dollar that we spend or every hour that we spend, even more important, has to go as far as possible. So when you pick a niche, you can actually speak the language of that niche. So instead of, saying, blasting it to everyone, you get to really, really, really tune in and dial into a person, and you get to craft your words so that it really hits home. And when choosing a niche, we kind of talked about how to choose a niche, but I'm kind of dating myself, but I liken it to a radio dial. You remember, does anybody remember, like when you're on the radio and you have that knob and it's like you're trying to get, I don't know, like it was like Kiss108 or whatever, if anyone was in New England.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it's like, okay, it's kind of fuzzy, you dial to the right, because finding, honing your niche and deciding who you want to work with isn't just like you said in terms of it was brave, and it is, because I didn't know if it was going to work and I didn't know if I was going to like it. But no, you get on the path, you start, and you're like, okay, this is fuzzy, let me tune it this way, and I know with your audience of heart-centered entrepreneurs, there's definitely parallels in terms of like tuning in and resonating and connecting, in terms of really finding who your message is meant to really work, you're really meant to work with. And especially with like heart-centered entrepreneurs, like if you're a yoga teacher, like one thing about choosing a niche is that in niching down is it can feel so counterintuitive to small business owners, because it's like, oh no, it's like, well, if I don't, I can help all of these people. Why would I choose these little group? And especially like if you're like, so for example, if like you're a yoga teacher, it's like, who couldn't benefit from doing yoga? Like the world would be, I mean, goodness gracious, can you even imagine a world where everyone did yoga? Like that would be amazing.
I just had that conversation the other day on the yoga green in here in Westport. We have a couple of yoga greens, and that's exactly what we were saying there. After the days we've had, what if?
But if you're a yoga teacher and you're in an environment or in a place where there's a lot of yoga studios and maybe they're already established, where are you going to find a voice if you just kind of go out there and I'm working on this analogy, but it's like, imagine if like you're in a balcony and there's like 100 people below you and you just go out on the balcony and you're like, I'm a yoga teacher. And it's like, okay, some people will look up, you're like, okay, that's cool. Versus like you find a niche and you're like, I'm a yoga teacher who works with expecting moms.
Right. That's what I was thinking of the people that I know. Somebody works with prenatal, somebody does like really focuses in on Ayurvedic, others focus on, the different types of yoga. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you'll be able to shine more and attract the people who are looking for those particular things.
Yes. And because you've picked a particular niche, you're going to bring a level of expertise to that market that wouldn't be there otherwise. And people are willing to pay a premium for experts. Like if you need to go have, oh my gosh, one book I think used the knee surgery example. Are you going to, you're not going to go to your GP and ask him to do knee surgery. Mm-hmm. You're going to go and find someone who knows exactly what your problem is for your knee. So if you're an expecting mom and you may have concerns about what's safe, and especially in being expecting moms, I can hear my 12-year-old behind me. You're going to want to make sure that you're safe. So you're going to you'd be willing to, go, drive the extra mile or spend the extra dollars to be with that person, with that area of expertise. And also, it doesn't mean you have to stay there. It's like if you find that niche and you're making all the money you want and whatever, you can always expand. Or if you find a niche and you find that it's not working, look at your messaging first. But you can always switch. You have in small business, it's a matter of just being flexible. So you just keep moving along the path, and you'll find your way.
So I recently took some of Amy Porterfield's courses, and one part of one of her courses was how to find your ICA, your, what does she call it? Ideal client avatar. And I know you use the word avatar, you use customer profile, your, I said ICA, and it was interesting. She said that, if you have an idea, and I had an idea, that it was heart-centered. Like, what is that, right? And we were talking about that in the group. Like, what does heart-centered mean? So now sometimes I say solo professionals, small business owners. Heart-centered to me were yogis, energy healers, light workers, coaches, and creatives. And she said, well, so she's like, well, what are, like, how do you talk with them? How do you find them? And so we had to go through all of those exercises. So if I think, before I go into what she said, and maybe I don't have to, that those are my people, how do I confirm that before I do my languaging? Like, what would you suggest as far as confirming that this is a viable, ideal client?
You can definitely use one piece of technology like I did. With it now, it was a Facebook group. And that was, I started the group just to start speaking, to see if people would be interested in some of the things I wanted to teach, and also what I wanted to know what people wanted to learn. So I did it. I tested it, and again, it was free to do. So why wouldn't I? So I started that Facebook group, invited some friends, and their friends invited friends, and their friends invited friends, and it grew over the past year and a half. I think we have like 700 wonderful women in there, and just by having conversations and just trying to bring value. But I also can tell you, I have in the past, one of my businesses before my last company, I went and set up an LLC, and I did all the business cards, and I did the marketing thing, and I was a booking agent, and because my almost like my first career was music, and I had the whole thing, I had all the things. And I started working with musicians, and I started working with brides, and I'm a very low drama person. And I put myself in a very high drama world.
Wow.
So I'm just like, I closed down everything. I'm like, I'm miserable. I can't do this. I love these people, but this isn't right for me. So definitely, before you go, to your point, how do you kind of test the market? You can, invite people to a forum, a webinar, talk. Hop into some groups, do some of that like group stalking, hang out and see if there's, they're talking about things that you might want to do, and just do that, out there and do some research.
That's such good advice. Yes. Awesome. The other thing that I did do, and maybe this wasn't as much to figure out my niche, but to figure out what were their pain points and how could I support them, was I did a survey, like I think you were saying, like a group and then a survey. And when people finished the survey, I asked if they'd be willing to get on the phone with me for 15 minutes. And I just asked, I think I had 2 or 3 questions, which was, what are the struggles you're having in your digital marketing in particular? Because I'm not going to tell anybody what to do with their like money stuff. Like, that's not my thing, but as far as digital marketing, I will. So what are they struggling, and what would be what if they could dream any kind of support, what would that be? And I was able to get some good language to use in my marketing. It's always evolving. As you know, we've probably worked on my messaging 3 times differently, right? But it's always evolving.
Yes. Yeah. And that, what you pointed out, I'll just drive that point home in terms of having conversations, so valuable. I learned so much by just having 30 minutes, Zoom teas with, with members of the group, and listening to the language, because as marketers, we want to speak the language of our market. A quick example in my group is I have a really extensive background in sales, and coming from that, my background of legal tech, sales is fine. You can throw that word around all day long. I put it in the group. I started using the word like sales techniques, whatever, crickets. I switch it to the word connection. Everything is fine.
Interesting.
And to me, there's not really a difference, because I come from like a place of a heart of sales as bringing value and win-win situations. So I don't have the negative connotation to it. But in terms of that language, I'm like, okay, we're not going to use that word. We'll use it sparingly. We're going to use the word that my market, that my market, that my, the people I work with understand.
That makes all the sense.
Yes, it's again just speaking the language of your market. You run into this probably you understand this in terms of being someone who's more technology minded, speaking the language of people that are coming to you for help, and being careful of the technology language that you use, because people find it, and I know this from coming from technology, people like it's scared, they don't understand the word, they don't feel stupid. And that's the last thing you want to do to your client. You want to make them feel honored and cherished and valued and loved. And like, whether or not you work with them, they're a person, they deserve that. So when we put a bunch of words they might not understand, that never feels great.
No, and it's interesting too, because I work with so many coaches, and I watch what they're doing, and I learn from them, and I learn from them. I am also very aware now of things that are not spoken or spoken, right? So and I see it even through Zoom, I can feel it, that if I start talking about analytics, I feel that like people are like, right? But if I say conversion pages, like this, but if we have a little bit of time and I say, let's just go take a look, see this, like I just explain it. And I do think, I always say that's my superpower, is being a common patient teacher, so that I can speak to my niche, to my person, and to know how they feel, so that I can bring them along in a calmer way to understand the tech. And not only, so now we're talking person niche, but I have to say too, that even since you and I started talking, I've niched down as far as my services. Right? So now I'm really focusing on what I think brings the biggest ROI and feels good, which is being generous, having conversations on email marketing, and to be able to create the different packages for people to get started, having those conversations, nurturing their own niche through email. And then if they need support in the other areas, the membership, the paid membership group that I've got running, the Rise Together, that's a good place for the more general. But really for the clients who are ready to make that commitment to email marketing, I'm hoping to be their teacher, their guide, right? Donald Miller says guide.
Yes, because you are, and you do it with, love and compassion. And we all need to bring up our tech, because tech, not in everyone's path, but it can be a real roadblock to growth. So if we are able to, harness that, harness the power of the technology, it allows us to do more, reach more people, not in terms of expending more of our energy, but it just expending, we invest the time in the tech, and then the tech can do the work for us. So we don't have to, so we can conserve more of our energy for, for something else.
That's awesome. I'm asking in the group, so if anybody who's listening to us live, or if you're listening to the replay, or we have somebody on the Zoom, if you have any questions, I hope that we've started you thinking about maybe narrowing down your niche. And what I loved about what Dani said today was, first of all, I loved the radio thing, which only some people will get, and some would be like, what's a radio? And but also, I liked what you said about knowing which language to speak, right? Like finding your niche gives you a voice and the language to speak, as though it is a different language. Like you said, sales versus connections.
Yeah, exactly. If you're working with construction workers, the language that you use in your marketing is going to be very different if you're working with, I don't know, maybe bakers, or I'm trying to think, whatever examples there. Or if you have a market with, it's like, 12-year-old boys, it's going to be very different than 50-year-old women. Right. The languages that I'm still trying to figure out how to speak 12-year-old. I'm working on it. It's like a work in progress.
But it's going to change in a minute anyway. So.
And one of those powers of the niches is that, I want to just make sure I sneak this in there, is that if you do find, do determine one, you determine who that person is. You can go where they are. almost like, looking for a particular flower, if you're looking for, I gotta have to work on this analogy, but, if you're looking for a particular flower and it only grows in a certain area of Massachusetts, and you want that flower, you go there.
Right.
So, if you find, who your person is, where they are, and that's where you can market, whether it's paid Facebook ads or Google or whatever, you can determine, maybe it's a geographic area, maybe it's a psychographic, maybe it's someone who, is really passionate about the environment, because, is, psychographics is very valid too, in terms of, okay, your people's values, people's passions, people's hobbies. That's not necessarily a demographic in terms of age or gender, gender affiliation or whatever, those kinds of things are. So there's that too.
That's so good. Right. All of that. I'm going to tell you, Deb Geschel, I think I always say her last name wrong. Deb Geschel is the message artist, and she's pointing out that in helping her clients, she's a copywriter, and in helping people to create their language for their everything, right? So their language that printed or on the internet. She says, she speaks this all the time with her clients, right? Messaging and language is huge, so valuable for reaching out to your ideal client. She wants to know, do you think we should be finding a niche in both our clients and our services? For example, should we only be offering a few specific things?
Whenever I get asked this question, it's, if you're hitting all your revenue goals that you could possibly want, then maybe don't mess with that. However, when there is power in niching, because when, like, for trying to think of different examples, but you focus on one thing, you're the expert in that thing, you get to harness all of your superpowers and all of your energy into that one avenue. So there's power there, because we've all tried to do, we've all been there in terms of doing like 10 different things at once, and we're switching. Okay, if the things that you're offering are very very different, you may want to look at, see, it's what other offerings that you're doing is like the superpower for your business. Like, where are you finding the most value, where are your clients finding the most value in terms of your ROI, the return on your investment of time. If you're doing 5 different things, but really one is where you're making the biggest impact for your business, you may want to consider leaning more to that, and maybe taking away from some of the other ones. I'd say it's a personal thing. If every business is different, because one thing that you do may not necessarily bring a lot of money, but it may be a great first step into your business. So in other words, I would never want to say, just because someone does something that doesn't make a ton of money, if that is the feeding system to your higher priced items, I would never want to say, like, oh yeah, definitely just drop everything, do one thing. So that's not the clearest answer, but that's a lot of the things that I consider when talking with someone about, whether or not they should, drop services or maybe even, add some in some cases.
Yeah, that's so true. It does make a lot of sense. She says makes sense. Thanks, Dani. I know that in just recently, like in the past few months, having decided to focus on email marketing, my personal decision in doing that for the services that I provide, or even that I want to provide, is because it's easy for me. And I love it because I love the organized sense of it. I love segmenting lists. I love creating sequences. And I love the idea that you're creating conversations with the people that have asked to be on your list. And also, what I was finding is when I would, and I'll still talk to my clients about the social media, but it's not where I put most of my time and energy as far as learning new things or perfecting. I have the big picture, but I'm not, like, Facebook changes by the minute. Right. So I know enough to do Facebook ads, the pixels, get the engagement. I'm actually in a course right now for Facebook groups. Thank you, Rachel Kaczynski. Shout out to Rachel Ski. Spark Your Bliss women's group. She's amazing. Brought me into that group. But it makes me feel like I'm in a comfortable zone versus trying to keep up with the social and the loudness and the busyness and the chaos. Email marketing to me seems organized and thoughtful and planned out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think you have to do like what feels really great to you. Let's see. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, because if you're not, you're going to be, there's already enough resistance in business. I'll use the word resistance, especially if you're honest. So you don't want to be one of the resistance points. If you can have it not be you, that would be in terms of your own internal, if you can take the resistance and have it not be the resistance be you, that's very important. Again, there's just more energy if the resistance isn't there.
So good. I'm going to put, our time went by so fast because I know I could talk with you forever. You have something going on in your group. I'm going to put your group in here on the chat,
Okay.
the Women's Small Business and Leadership. So you have something going on this afternoon, right? Somebody's coming to speak.
Actually, she came early. She's going to be on at 11.
Oh, at 11. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, she's we work. I always say a healthy business starts with a healthy owner. So every once in a while, on the weekends, we dedicate our group to wellness, and like once, I think maybe once a month. Business growth is also making sure we take care of our health, because if we don't have our health and energy in check, that's also a roadblock to business. So we have a master breathwork instructor coming on at 11 in our group.
I'll put it in here.
It'll be in the replay if anybody wants to hop in and check on it too.
Self-care, master.
Yeah,
Master.
Hemingway. She's a brilliant, amazing woman with an incredible story.
I want to put her name in here. What is her name?
It's Patience Hemingway. It sounds like Hemingway, but it's Hemingway.
Gotcha. Okay, put that in the chat.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell people for today?
Let's see. Don't be just start. Just take action. And it's gonna no matter what, no matter where you start, you're gonna look back on what you did 6 months and be like, oh wow, I could have done that better. So don't worry about it, because no matter what you do, no matter how perfect the plan is laid out, you're gonna in 6 months, a year, you're gonna be like, oh wow, I can't believe I did that. So just start, because you're gonna have the same conversation with yourself in 6 months or a year anyways. And of course, thank you so much for mentioning the group. Anybody that wants to join us over in the Facebook group is absolutely more than welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend, for joining me today.
Thank you
so
for
good.
having me. Thank you for everyone who joined and watched the replay.
So good. I'm going to shut us off here. You guys, if you have questions later, as you're thinking about this, pop them into the chat. I know Dani checks. She's really active on Facebook. You can hashtag replay or
in your
tag
amazing
me.
group.
Yes.